Welcome to this event here in Dubai and also on the screens. I am happy to welcome all of you. My name is Madeleine Werner. I'm working for Misereor, and there I am working as expert for energy systems and renewable energies. I'm moderating this event on behalf of my colleague Lydia, who is sadly fall ill, so she's not here at the moment. But the event was planned by her, so please send her the gratitude if you like it in the end. So today's session is under the name Increasing Trust and Transparency for a Socially Just Energy Transition under the Paris Agreement. And with this title, we want to explore the role of transparency in increasing trust under the Paris Agreement. Of course, this is in the title. But what do we mean with this? And what we mean with this should be explored by all our panelists, and you see different ones. I will present them to you in a minute. But before I'm doing this, I quickly want to give you an overview where we are going and where we are coming from. Because we are speaking about indigenous communities, we are speaking about implementation, local action in Germany, especially with a focus on the just energy transition. And we are also focusing, and this is linked to what we are seeing here, what's happening here in some rooms over there. We are speaking about the GST and try to link it to the UNFCCC there. Behind this event, there are three organizations, as already said. There is CIDSE, there is Fastenaktion, and there is Misereor. So now I would like to ask to go to the next slide. And here you see all our, and the next slide. Yeah, yes, great. Here you see that we are going to have a panel discussion in this event. And the first intervention will be by Marta, who is a representative of the Uruena Vivo network. I hope I pronounced it right. If not, please excuse it. In Brazil, on the energy transition in Brazil. Then we will have Edel speaking from the Brazil Foreign Ministry on Energy and Sustainable Development. Then we have Tobias Vosen from the German Environmental Ministry speaking on transparency and UNFCCC. And we have David Knecht from Fastenaktion on Transparency International. The panel discussion will be followed by small questions by you, and you are happily invited to raise your questions when all our speakers gave their intervention. Good, and with this, let us dive into our first speaker of the day. It is Edel, and Edel, you now have, it is Marta, and Marta, you now have the floor. There is some questions to you I would like to ask you, and we can go to the next slide. Great. Marta, what is the experience of your community with the energy transition? What are opportunities and challenges?
Está funcionando. Olá, bom dia, boa tarde. Bom, eu venho da região noroeste de Mato Grosso, no Brasil, e estou mostrando essa primeira foto aqui só para localizar vocês, né, essa região maravilhosa com muita água doce. Aí estão presentes 11 povos indígenas e também as pessoas que trabalham junto conosco, que são os ribeirinhos, assentados, pescadores, né, de comunidades tradicionais.
Good afternoon. Welcome, anyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm from the northeast of Mato Grosso, and I'm showing you this slide to show a little bit from where I'm coming from. It's a beautiful region. It's home to 11 indigenous peoples, but also several traditional communities with whom we work together.
Então, do lugar que eu venho falar é a bacia do Rio Juruena, que é afluente, né, que é um dos afluentes que forma o Amazonas. Nossos maiores desafios hoje, atualmente, é a questão das hidrelétricas, né? As hidrelétricas que poucos são citados nessa transição energética e que faz parte da matriz de transição energética do Brasil, né? O Brasil, ele ultimamente se vangloria porque está fazendo essa transição energética, mas pouco fala dos impactos que acontecem dentro dos nossos territórios e com os povos indígenas que moram, principalmente nessa bacia no estado de Mato Grosso.
So I'm from the Juruena Basin, which is a tributary to the Amazon River. And I'd like to speak today a little bit about the challenge of the hydroelectric dams and the impacts that they're causing, which is something that we're facing. There's not a lot of discussion about this. Brazil talks a lot about its energy transition, but hydroelectric dams are a big part of that, and they're causing huge impacts.
Assim, só para, se vocês veem no mapa de 2019 para 2023, o aumento dessas usinas são bastante significativa, e principalmente as pequenas hidrelétricas, as CGHs, que são até 5 megawatts de potência. Essas que nos preocupa mais ainda, porque não existe uma legislação que regulamenta o licenciamento ambiental para a construção dessas pequenas usinas hidrelétricas.
I'd like to show the increase of these dams between 2019 and 2023, which you can also see on the map. And we're particularly concerned about the small hydroelectric dams. They're called CGH dams, and they're up to 5 megawatt. And we are very concerned about them because they don't require environmental licensing. They're not regulated.
Na bacia do Juruena, nós temos alguns povos que já têm os seus instrumentos de consulta livre, prévia informada, conforme a Convenção 69 internacional, como esses protocolos de consultas. No entanto, isso não é observado e não é atendido, né, pelo Estado brasileiro, como os povos indígenas querem ser consultados de uma forma geral, né?
In the Juruena Basin, there are several communities who have already developed consultation protocols, like this one that she has here, which establish how the communities want to be consulted about projects that impact their ways of life and their territories. But these protocols are not being respected by the government.
E também uma das questões que nós observamos no nosso estado, e acredito que não só no Mato Grosso, mas em todo o estado brasileiro, é que falamos muito de transição energética, mas igual está acontecendo na COP, que os países que estão negociando nossos direitos para terem mais lucros. No nosso estado não é diferente. Quem faz parte desse processo de mais construção de usinas hidrelétricas são os grandes latifundiários e que potencializa o desmatamento e mais plantio de grãos dentro do nosso estado. Então, isso potencializa o desmatamento que está ligado totalmente com as mudanças climáticas.
So what we are seeing is that this lack of consultation and consideration is not just an issue in Mato Grosso, in my state, but in the whole of Brazil. There's a lot of talk about energy transition, including here at the COP. But just like here at the COP, countries are negotiating about doing something about this, but they want more profit. And what we're facing as well is that these companies, they want more profit, they want more energy because they want to produce more grains, more soy. and that the big farmers want to produce more soy, and that is impacting our territories, and it's also impacting climate change.
Então, para encerrar minha fala, a gente faz um trabalho, né, de monitoramento. Para vocês conhecerem mais, podem acessar esse QR Code, e ali está o mapeamento, o trabalho que a gente faz através da Rede Juruena Vivo na nossa região. Obrigado.
So to finalize, we do a lot of monitoring, and if you would like to know more about our work, the monitoring that we do under the umbrella of the Juruena Vivo network, you can access the QR codes and learn more about our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marta, for explaining this to us. It is sad to hear that the reality is looking like this, but it's also empowering, and it's really good to hear that you're taking over some action to increase the conditions. That's quite well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also for setting the scene of our discussion with your local experience from the indigenous communities. Our next speaker is Edel Narase. Edel, I would like to ask you to address in your intervention the following two questions, and I read them out so that it is good to understand. What are your views on how the energy transition in Brazil connects with the lives and sustainable production patterns of indigenous people? How can the global stocktake contribute towards a faster and more participatory energy transition in the rural world? So these are like the two questions we would like to have answered, and now I give over to you.
Boa tarde a todos os presentes. Primeiro, não haverá transição energética sem ouvir os povos indígenas e as comunidades locais. Para começar, é importante nós falarmos que no Brasil existem mais de 250 povos indígenas, né? E são 29 segmentos de comunidades tradicionais diversas. E essas comunidades estão nos territórios.
Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for being here and for the invitation. I'd like to start by saying that there will be no energy transition without the consultation of indigenous peoples and local communities and traditional communities. In Brazil, there are 250 indigenous peoples, and there are 29 different groups of traditional people.
Em primeiro lugar, é preciso reconhecer e conhecer esses povos e comunidades tradicionais e demarcar seus territórios.
In the first place, it's really important to recognize these indigenous people and traditional communities and to demarcate their territories.
Também é preciso respeitar a consulta livre e prévia informada desses povos e comunidades tradicionais e reconhecer o direito da livre consulta informada dos povos indígenas e de todas as comunidades locais.
It is also really important to respect and recognize the right to free, prior and informed consent of these indigenous peoples and traditional peoples.
Transição justa é os povos e comunidades tradicionais entenderem e compreenderem os documentos internacionais que são produzidos e que falam de transição justa. Sem uma tradução que os povos indígenas e que as comunidades tradicionais compreendam e estejam também aptos para discutir, para debater, não haverá transição justa.
A just transition means that indigenous people and local communities need to understand, the traditional communities need to understand the documents that are being made. There need to be translations so that they are able to debate the things that are in these documents.
Portanto, a transparência para a equipe do Global Stocktake é importante compreender que sem a participação desses povos, e estou repetindo, sem ouvir, sem escutar esses povos e comunidades tradicionais, não haverá transição justa no meio rural.
So it's really important for the Global Stocktake team to understand that without the participation of these indigenous peoples and traditional communities, there will not be a just energy transition.
Queria contar para vocês os territórios onde a minha colega indígena falou que são pontos, que são territórios para construção de energia, de construção de hidrelétricas, são territórios de terras indígenas, são territórios de comunidades tradicionais em muitas situações.
I'd like to stress that the territories that my colleague told you about, where these dams are being built, they are territories of indigenous peoples, of traditional peoples.
Quando se fala em transparência, quando se está construindo o bem social, eu queria contar para vocês, o bem-estar social não chega lá nos povos e comunidades tradicionais.
When we talk about transparency and about creating well-being, I'd like to tell you that this well-being and these projects don't reach these territories.
As construções, as energias que muitas vezes são tratadas como energia limpa, elas violam o direito, roubam os territórios dos povos indígenas e das comunidades tradicionais.
The so-called clean energy is violating the rights, and it's very often involved in land grabbing. It's stealing lands of traditional communities.
E só contando uma história para vocês. Esses territórios, esses povos e essas comunidades tradicionais não têm acesso a essa energia que é gerada dentro dos seus territórios.
And I'd like to just tell you a story that these people, these communities, these territories, they don't have access to the energy that's being created around them.
Transparência é falarmos de justiça social.
Transparency means talking about social justice.
Transparência é reconhecermos os direitos dos povos indígenas, das diásporas negras, vítimas de muitas violações na história.
Transparency also means recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples and of the Black diaspora, the Quilombola communities that have suffered so many violations in their history.
Transparência é nós conhecermos e colocarmos nos diálogos e nas negociações esses povos e comunidades também efetivamente.
Transparency also means guaranteeing that these communities can effectively participate in negotiations.
Povos e comunidades não querem estar na COP somente como figuras e não participando das negociações. É preciso ouvi-los, é preciso a participação efetiva.
Indigenous peoples and traditional communities, they don't want to be at the COP here just as second-class participants. They want to participate, they want to be part of the discussions.
Convido a todos para conhecer povos e comunidades tradicionais no Brasil, ouvir as histórias deste segmento.
I'd like to invite you all to meet the traditional communities and indigenous peoples of Brazil and to hear more about their stories.
Estou secretária nacional de Povos e Comunidades Tradicionais e Desenvolvimento Rural Sustentável do Ministério do Meio Ambiente. Sou uma mulher preta.
I am the Executive Secretary for Traditional and Indigenous Communities and Sustainable Rural Development from the Ministry of Environment, and I'm a Black woman.
E estando no governo, é a nossa responsabilidade garantirmos essa participação.
And being part of the government, it's part of my responsibility to guarantee the participation of indigenous peoples and traditional communities.
A contribuição dos povos indígenas e das comunidades locais, elas são imensas para toda a humanidade. Elas fazem e prestam serviços ecossistema para todo o ecossistema e para toda a humanidade, protegendo e conservando a biodiversidade.
The contribution of indigenous peoples and traditional communities is huge. They provide and they protect ecosystem services that contribute to the well-being of the whole humanity and the whole earth.
E transparência é nós diminuirmos essas desigualdades da participação, das figuras que decidem e das imagens de quem decidem e incluir todos os segmentos dos povos e comunidades, não somente do Brasil, mas de todo o mundo. Muito obrigada.
And transparency means reducing the inequality between those who make decisions and are part of the discussion, and ensure that indigenous peoples and traditional communities, not just from Brazil, but from the whole world, can be part of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edel, for sharing these views. That's quite rich. And what I took from it is that transparency is leading to justice. It is leading to having people in the decision-making, especially indigenous people. It is leading to more participation and involvement, and in the end to better results, right, of the energy transition we want to see. This is very inspiring. Thank you very much for this input. We will now go over to our next speaker, Tobias Vosen. And Tobias is coming from a different background. He's coming from Germany, and he will now give us a more high-level message, but also some input on how the energy transition in Germany is looking. And I will read out the questions so that they're precise and everyone knows what it will be about. So the first question: how can the enhanced transparency framework be used to leverage trust and contribution to an effective functioning of the Paris Agreement? And perhaps I give some context. The enhanced transparency framework is like the mechanism, the reporting mechanism of the UNFCCC. The second question is, what are the challenges to include local level climate action in the UNFCCC by annual reports? And then the third question, how can these reports be used for informed political decision making at national and at local level, for example, from Germany? So now, Tobias, over to you.
Thank you. Are you also showing my slides? Oh, the colors changed, but it's nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, here are the questions again. Madeleine already read out. Yeah, trust is a very important thing here for our negotiations. The whole world came here to make an agreement, and to having this agreement, and at the end that everyone is trusting the agreement, that everyone who agreed to something is also fulfilling it. For this we need transparency. It's very important. It has already been part of the convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and now we're working on fulfilling the agreements under the Paris Agreement. And maybe let me say a few words about what is involved in this and how we are to be transparent. So it's divided more or less two parts. One are the inventories, where every country, under the Paris Agreement, so in the future now, every country is telling about how much emission it's put in the air, and also regarding forests and things like that, how much emissions they get out of the air. But usually it's, unfortunately, more is getting in than out. And the other part, also very important, is about more the political background. Which policies are in place to lower emissions, to decrease emissions, and also other things. How much support is provided, how much support is received, and things like that. Let me go to the next one. Yeah, and this is a BTR, the Germany's last report, where they explained their policies and what they're doing. And I think it's, well, this report is for the other countries, so they can see what Germany is doing and, well, maybe also not doing. But it can also be used for other people who want to just get an overview what is Germany doing, and well, I think that's an, oh, I'm going too fast. More the next slide. So if you come to local levels, then for example, in Germany, they might wonder, well, okay, how is the traffic policy to be in the future? Are we more going for bicycle lanes or public transport, things like that? And they can look in the report and see, okay, for the transport sector, this and that is planned, subsidies for electric cars, things like that. And to give you, well, not for the local area, but for the whole of Germany, for the federal level, in Germany we have this Klimaschutzgesetz, climate protection law. And this law is actually based on the transparency rules and things like that. So we have this every year in April, we make a rough estimate about the emissions from the previous year. And as you can see here in the picture, then these emissions are divided into different categories. If someone is here from transparency, please be careful. These are not the normal categories we use for international reporting. But, so they're more aligned to the responsibilities of the ministries. And then for each ministry, there's a target, and then it's checked if each ministry fulfills the targets, and if they're above the target, which sometimes happens, then they have to make a plan about how what they're going to do to be able to fulfill their goals in the future. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too fast. But otherwise, if you have questions, I'm very welcome. I very gladly answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tobias, for explaining us how the enhanced transparency framework can be used to increase trust and also to give us a short input on what is happening in Germany currently and how also the transparency measures are taken up in the communication Germany is doing. Thank you very much. We will now head over to David Knecht, who is sitting right next to Tobias. And David will explain to us the results of a study that was recently published and just give us an overview of the findings. And this study is like summing up different NDCs, communications, and transparency in it. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much. And I think I have to manipulate that myself. So I'm not Edel Nazare, but I think we have discovered that in the meantime. So I have the pleasure to be the last speaker. Usually I don't like that, but I think in that case it's not bad, because I think I can connect a little bit what we have heard from our previous speakers, presenting the results of our NDC transparency study that we conducted together from Fastenaktion with our colleagues from CIDSE, BUND and Misereor. And this initiative really has the ambition to increase trust, transparency and participation in climate action. And for this, we engaged in a series of case studies in different countries. And this slide is incomplete. There should be text here on this slide. So I don't know what happened. Somehow that must have been lost on the way. But basically what is to be said on that slide, we looked at 3 levels. So that's the 3 icons you see. The first level is we looked into how, let me read it, at least I have it here. All right. Transparency in target setting. So do countries have transparent targets in climate action? Secondly, transparency in progress tracking. So do countries also report about what they're doing? This is what Tobias just was presenting. And finally, we had a focus on energy. And that very much links to what we heard from Marta and also from Edel. So we did this study in different countries, more than 10 countries, and from a couple of them we then produced a meta-study, which I'm going now to present the main results. And luckily we have the text here, so that's good. So on the level of transparency in target setting, I will be very brief. It's not important the numbers, but maybe a little bit the colors. We see that when we talk about the enabling environment, so that is the mix of policies at hand in a given country to actually achieve the targets it has set itself in the Paris Agreement, to fulfill the Paris Agreement, we see a mixed picture, which means the targets or the measures are not well enough, they're not strong enough to actually achieve the targets. Maybe there are too many voluntary measures and not enough incentives or not enough prescriptive measures, like the prohibition maybe of the use of fossil fuels in a certain, or the construction of new coal plants, power plants. We then looked into transparency in progress tracking, and here we have a mixed picture. First of all, on the international level, we see that there is a good reporting on individual measures, but much less on policies as such. So are policies in its complete form implemented or not, we don't really know at the international level. That's at least our assessment, and I'm happy to hear that Germany is here on a good track. On the national level, however, the picture is mixed. We see that the reports exist on the national level. The reports are here, but they are inconsistent and irregular. So it's very difficult to know actually what is happening really in the country. And that is a problem, because it's difficult then to also have trust that the processes are inclusive and respect the rights of local communities, and in the case of Brazil, also indigenous peoples, of course. And I would then come to the next one, which is our focus on energy. We looked into energy because it's the main driver of climate change. And here we find, actually, that's the good news, in many countries there are systems and schemes to support local energy projects. However, the participation in decision-making on the local level is not very good. The mechanism to allow indigenous communities, to allow local communities to participate in the projects that are happening on the ground is not very strong. This is what we see throughout this relay, throughout the continuity of consultation, throughout the process of the project, and also the core benefits of the projects are not very strongly developed. So there's a lot of room to improve and to make actually the energy transition to be a driver of development of local communities and indigenous peoples. So what does that mean for us here here at COP28? We talk about the global stocktake. It means for us that we have to think about that when we discuss the NDC, which is the planning instrument for many countries, which comes after the global stocktake. So we should plan NDCs in an inclusive and socially just manner. And it's important that this is highlighted already now when we discuss about the global stocktake. And secondly, that we ask also in the global stocktake to produce, to give a mandate to the enhanced transparency framework, so that the different reports that are being produced are then also analyzed in a synthetic way, so that we can extract learnings and use it to build trust among the parties. So that's on the international level. And lastly, on the national level, that we use this work to build coordination capacities. That's very important to actually monitor the implementation of climate policy, so that they're well implemented. And finally, that we improve the community access to energy projects. That's important and very essential in many countries, so that communities can directly access funds and drive their own development according to their own dreams. Many thanks.
Thank you, David, for giving us this overview also about the studies. I think it connected the different levels we had in our interventions for now. Now I would really like to give over to all of you. You were sitting here, you were participating in the event, and I'm sure there were some ideas coming up in your mind when you were listening, perhaps some thoughts, perhaps some inspirations, but also questions. And I would now like to give over to all of you to stand up, speak up, and share all of this with you, with the panel. And if you have questions, I'm sure there is time to answer these questions. So just raise your hand or stand up. Yes, there is someone.
Thank you so much for being here. This is really interesting to connect kind of these two angles. And I was wondering to the panelists from Brazil if you could speak a little bit to the way that your work intersects with the work of the administration. I know last year there's a pretty big change in the administration, the government in Brazil, and whether that has made your work easier or if you're feeling optimistic about kind of the future of transparency and also the kind of local monitoring that you're doing.
Thank you very much for this session. My question also to the panelists from Brazil is if you could expand a bit more on how your spirituality comes into your work and what opportunities do you have in global conferences like COP to really bring that to the table and explain how your spirituality helps you to drive your messaging in these international fora. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we will just take these two questions because I know we are short in time, and then we will take the other two questions, and I think then we are good to go. So if you would like to answer them, and perhaps our translation can also support us. Yes.
Certo. Ao longo de todo o processo... isso aqui vai traduzir, desculpa. Ao longo de todo o processo, na visão, né, que nós podemos observar, é que os povos indígenas sempre foi de muita luta. Não existe um governo X ou outro governo que atende, de fato, as nossas demandas. Mas é claro que teve um governo anterior, que todos conhecem, que é o governo Bolsonaro, onde os nossos direitos foram atropelados, que não foram cumpridos e muitos estavam correndo risco e até hoje correm o risco de perder, principalmente sobre o direito do território.
So our struggle has always been very strong, and there has been no government that really fulfilled all their demands that we have, and there was an easy dialogue. But of course, we know that the last government that we have, the Bolsonaro government, really bulldozed over all our rights. They were really very threatened, and still today there are rights that are being threatened.
Hoje retorna para nós governo que tem feito mais, tanto na saúde, educação, em políticas públicas voltado aos povos indígenas. Mas a negociação dos nossos direitos, a negociação dos direitos de povos e comunidades tradicionais, elas ainda estão na mesa. E, por esse motivo, nós estamos aqui falando sobre energia renovável, sobre transição justa, porque, justamente, nós não somos consultados ainda sobre essa temática, né, dentro dos nossos territórios. E, quando somos ouvidos, conforme nosso protocolo de consulta, é sobre pressão social no Brasil. Ela só acontece porque nós fazemos pressão. Ao contrário, nós não somos consultados.
So the current government is doing a lot more for our health and education systems. It's a huge improvement, but our rights are still not fully being respected. They're still being negotiated. And that's exactly why we're here to talk about this energy transition in which our rights are very often not respected. And when they are, like when we manage to make sure that they comply with our consultation protocols, it only happens after a lot of social pressure.
E, assim, referente ainda ao governo, só para lembrar um pouquinho ontem, como a nossa ministra Sônia Guajajara falou, não é porque temos indígenas no governo que está dado os nossos direitos. Ainda a luta continua dentro desses espaços políticos, a qual eles estão presentes. A diferença é que agora nós temos pessoas que são deputados, ministros, indígenas, que estão ali para falar por nós nesse espaço de decisão.
So like our minister, Sonia Guajajara, said yesterday, it's not that just because we have indigenous representatives in government and in Congress that it's given that our rights are being respected. The only difference is that now we have these representatives who can speak and protect our rights in these decision-making places.
Quanto à relação de tudo isso que vem acontecendo contra os nossos direitos, e se isso afeta a nossa espiritualidade, a gente fica até emocionado assim de falar, porque uma vez dado, né, esse modelo de expansão, esse modelo de crescimento tecnológico, de exploração, ele afeta diretamente a nossa espiritualidade.
About the question about how these developments impact our spirituality, I get emotional to talk about that because these projects of technological and agro-industrial expansion, they impact our spirituality very directly.
Porque os não indígenas classificam os homens e a natureza. E nós não conseguimos separar o homem e a natureza. É como se nós somos a própria natureza, a própria parte daquele lugar que nós vivemos. Então, para nós, o rio não é só um rio. O rio tem um dono, que no meu idioma nós chamamos de Manamiu, que é o dono das águas e que é uma espiritualidade, uma entidade feminina.
So, white men, they separate people from nature, but for us, it's the same thing. We are part of nature. For us, the river is part of us, and it has an owner, which is a spiritual entity, and the name is... Manamiu is the name of the spiritual owner of the river, and it's a female entity.
E assim, todos o que tem na natureza, ele tem um dono. Os animais têm um dono, a mata tem um dono. Então, isso, quando você tem uma construção de hidrelétrica sem consulta livre, prévia informada, nos lugares sagrados para nós, como os saltos, nossos rios, isso afeta diretamente a nossa forma de viver dentro dos nossos territórios.
So all things in nature, they have an owner, a spiritual owner. The rivers have that, the forests, the trees. So when you have the construction of hydroelectric dams that impact these places that are sacred for us, like our rivers, that directly impacts our spirituality.
E para encerrar essa pergunta, o que nós temos a dizer é que o Brasil, ele já produz o excedente de energia. Ele já consegue manter, né, a sociedade com essa energia. No entanto, a energia gerada no país hoje é para as indústrias, né? Se fosse distribuída para nós, seria bom, mas é um dos países que tem a energia mais cara do mundo. E é um país que produz muita energia através das hidrelétricas. Perto do nosso território, há hidrelétricas. No entanto, não são essas hidrelétricas que dão retorno de energia para nossas aldeias. Nós pagamos energia muito cara, mesmo com mais de 70 hidrelétricas em várias fases no entorno e dentro dos nossos territórios, conforme mostra esse mapa de mapeamento da bacia do Juruena.
So Brazil is a country that produces an excess amount of energy. It produces more than it needs. But the energy that it produces is used for industry. It's for the big agribusiness companies. And it would be great if we would get some of that energy, but we actually pay a very high price for energy in monetary terms. We are surrounded by 70 hydroelectric dams in our Juruena basin, but that energy doesn't reach our villages. That energy is for the big companies.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marta, for explaining this to us. The time is already becoming short, so we need to end the event. There were 2 more questions, and I would like to encourage you to ask the questions later at the end of the event. The speakers will be here. You can ask the questions. So don't feel cut in your participation. So I would like to thank all of you who participated here in the room and also those who participated online. It was great to have you here. It was great to have some interaction. I hope you got some inspiration, some thoughts, how transparency can lead to more trust, to more ambitious, and why it is important also for climate justice and the realities on the ground, like in real life, and also in UNFCCC, the space we are all in at this moment. So thank you all, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Madeline. I just wanted to say thank you to Madeline and thank you to the panelists, obrigado, and for reminding us how important a truly just energy transition is and what it needs to look like. We will take a transition break now,